Hey guys, welcome to another episode of You've Got Potential, a podcast dedicated to talking about graduate studies, graduate programs specifically in STEM and science. Today we have Tanvi, who's going to share a little bit about herself and her research. So Tanvi, if you want to go ahead and give a general overview of your history and your experience with research.
Sure. So my name is Tanvi. I'm a rising senior at Rutgers, majoring in cell bio and neuroscience and minoring in linguistics. I've been working in the lab of Dr. Deborah Laskin in the pharmacology and toxicology department at the Ernest Martin School of Pharmacy at Rutgers since 2017 now. So it's been give or take 4 years. It's been a great time. My research is related to pulmonary inflammation in response to different toxicants and sort of insults to the lung. And I've been able to find a great group of people in my lab doing research and sort of explore different facets of the lung and the liver and inflammation. And after Rutgers, I hope to go to an MD-PhD program. So get my MD and my PhD and enter a career in research and all that good stuff.
Cool. And you mentioned that you've been in the lab since 2017, but you're also a rising senior like myself. So you've been working with this lab before you came to Rutgers?
Yeah, so actually I think this was junior year of high school, if I remember correctly. There are these like programs in New Jersey for a lot of like whatever those like high schoolers where they can introduce themselves to research over the summer. So I applied for one of those and I was basically matched with the Alaskan lab based on sort of whatever interests I had at the time. And so I came to lab that summer. I worked full time between junior and senior year of high school. I loved it so much. I had no idea what research was. I did not want to go into research at all. I wanted to be a doctor and I just wanted to see what research was like. I absolutely fell in love with it. And I was like, I have to do research now. I can't not have research as part of my career. So then I asked Dr. Laskin, my PI, later that senior year, if I could come back over the next summer. Then I came back the summer before freshman year of Rutgers. And then because I ended up committing to Rutgers, I was like, might as well just stay in this lab because it was a really great environment. So then I've been there since.
So what are you working on now specifically?
So right now, there are mainly 2 projects I'm working on. I think the lab as a whole in general looks at different toxicants like ozone or mustard gas, stuff that we are either exposed to by the environment due to pollution or stuff that remains chemical threats or potentially agents that can harm us. So one of my projects is looking at mustard gas, which is this desiccating agent that was first used in World War I, but has been sort of used and manufactured and stockpiled up until very recently. And so we have a grant from the NIH in order to find potential targets for therapeutics to combat the effects of mustard gas, and especially how they affect the lung and how they affect the inflammatory response following a gas exposure. So that's one of the projects I'm working on, is looking at exposure to mice in their lungs after they're exposed to mustard gas and trying to understand the mechanisms behind how the inflammation progresses and different immune cells that are involved in that regulation. And then the other project I'm working on also is a collaboration with another lab that looks at liver function. So there is this condition called NASH, or non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, and it affects a lot of people in the United States, especially people that are obese or suffer from diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and it's mainly due to poor diet and lifestyle choices. So what we've done is we're interested in how how patients that have NASH actually develop lung injuries and lung pathologies. So in this study, we have a mouse model where we induce the mice to develop this liver NASH injury, and then we take a look at their lungs and see if their lungs also develop any injury or inflammation.
Just hearing you talk about your research and your experience in your lab, you're so comfortable talking about what you're doing. So what was that journey like in terms of science communication? What experiences helped you develop these skills?
That's a really good question. I think for me, sort of similar to where I didn't really understand what was going on in the lab at first, I was really nervous about talking about it. I think what really helped is presenting my research, even if I didn't really understand what was going on. That first summer, when I was through the Partners in Science program, we had like a mini symposium at the end. So I was able to present my research. I presented like to my lab before then and sort of understood what I was trying to do. And in freshman year itself, I started presenting at conferences. So conferences it was a big deal for me. It was like, I've loved talking about my research since the beginning, actually. I don't just the idea of disseminating that information. So like, let me go present at these conferences so I gain some confidence. I can try to feel like I understand, I know what I'm talking about. So I think my first conference was like, yeah, first semester, freshman year, and then I just kept presenting. And that's really helped a lot, is if you can become comfortable with talking about your project, and then you slowly become comfortable with like doing the science and understanding the science and writing about the science. That helps too. Like I also did research for credit every semester since freshman year, and at least with the CBN major, they make you write that report at the end of the semester, and that helped a lot too. Is like forcing me to consolidate all this information so I can actually communicate my science.
I was going to ask, you mentioned like those progress reports from CBN and also like all the many different in-person conferences. How had that changed in COVID times, and how are you able to adapt in terms of scientific communication?
Yeah, and that's a really big thing. I loved going to conferences. I love traveling to conferences, and obviously I couldn't when COVID hit. I was stuck at home. Uh, Virtual conferences are not the same. I think there's pros and cons. I was able to present at way more conferences than I would have otherwise if I had sort of been traveling in person, having to like take flights all over the United States. So that was a good thing. I think I got a lot more experience talking about my research. It's a little tough because not a lot of people show up to your posters. Like you're sitting there alone, presenting to yourself, which is okay. And then or sometimes like record your presentation and you have to answer questions when people ask. So that was a little bit of a bummer. I can't wait. I think now is the year. My first non-virtual conference is going to be March. So that's like they've already decided that they're going to be they're going to be in person, and it's in San Diego. I'm super excited to travel. Yeah. And then I think in general, though, having that sort of time off during COVID helped me a lot. I was stuck at home, I think from March to May, my whole lab was essentially closed. There was really no one in the lab. And then even I only got back in lab in August. So even from May to August, I was just working virtually and doing mostly data analysis. And I was able to sort of help my PI with one of the grants she was writing and doing literature review for one of her grants. So I think that also sort of forced me to sit down and read a lot of papers. And that was where also like that was like another time where I was able to gain a lot of knowledge and sort of understanding of the nuances of my research, and more than my research, sort of understand the type of research I want to do in the future, because I was able to explore a lot when I read those papers. So it felt like I was actually doing something that I wanted to do and like learning about my like potential questions I want to ask in the future. And that also really helped me sort of navigate, okay, what projects do I want to do in the lab after this, or what do I want to bring into the project that I'm already doing, that sort of thing. So a good and a bad side of COVID. I think net like zero, but there are positives and negatives.
This is all very, very exciting to hear, and I'm thrilled to ask. So, how did you decide that CBN, cell biology and neuroscience, was the major for you?
And sometimes I wonder that myself too. I think if I could go back, I would be an MVB major, just because now, now I think I'm more interested in mobile and to an extent biochem. But when I came into college, I was obsessed with neuroscience. I loved the brain. I wanted to whatever be a neurologist. Wanted to do research in Alzheimer's. And I thought that wouldn't change. I was really adamant that that wouldn't change. And I thought that the lab I was in, it was not related to the brain at all. We do like zero brain related research. But I thought, oh, this will just be a temporary thing, and then I'll go find a lab that's doing neuroscience research. And then I just loved my lab so much, like I couldn't leave. It was impossible to leave. The people were just incredible, and the research I was doing, I really felt I could see sort of the impact it could make down the line on the lives of actual people. So because of my lab, and I think because of all the stuff I've learned in my lab, my interests really shifted from neuroscience to more cell and molecular biology. And I decided to stay with cell biology because at least like CBN, the good thing about CBN is that it's cell biology and neuroscience. So in freshman year, I had made my whole 4-year plan. I was going to take every single neuroscience class offered by CBN, like all the advanced neuro classes, anything, all the neuropsychopharm classes, like all of those electives. And then sophomore year, I was like, I can't do this anymore. So I changed all my classes to be all the cell bio classes. I'm taking a lot of MBB seminar classes, like any MBB class I can fit in there also. I am trying to fit in just because I know that's more in line with what I wanted to do. Although now that I'm applying for graduate school, I'm sort of coming back to the to the neuroscience side because I don't want to let go of that interest that I have in the brain either. So we'll see what my sort of end game in research ends up being. I definitely like to stay in immunology. I think that's what I've sort of found my home in. But we'll see how I can incorporate like my other interests in all these fields.
Is that where linguistics come into? Like, I think it's a minor, maybe I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, I'm minoring in linguistics. I think linguistics really, it doesn't have anything to do with anything. I lived all over the world, sort of. When I was growing up, it was moved a lot of places. I lived in like India, Oman, like Canada, like a bunch of different places in the US. So I think every place I went to, we would like learn another language. Like in Canada, at least in the province that I lived in Ontario, you were forced to learn French from fourth grade onwards. And that's when I went to Canada when I was in fourth grade. So I learned French there. And then my high school it was a really small high school. It only offered Spanish. So I learned Spanish there. So I got really into this idea of languages. And so I decided, oh, let me sort of take some linguistics classes to see whether it's about like languages. I was really interested in learning languages. So I was like, oh, linguistics is probably about that. I realized linguistics is not about learning languages. It's all about data analysis. It's about sort of finding patterns in languages and the rules that govern these languages. And I realized that linguistics is way more like my research than probably even my classes that I take that are like STEM classes. My like cell bio classes are all about memorization, but in my linguistics classes, we're literally given data sets of words, of sentences, or of letters, and you're like, hey, find the patterns or draw some conclusions based on what you see. And so that actually, it was really interesting because like those linguistics classes and the exercises that we did in those classes actually really helped me a lot with my research and sort of be able to like sort of identify like little things that were different and little patterns that stood out.
I also have to ask, so why MD-PhD?
Yeah, that's a big ticket question, right?
I
So
know that's like a flip, but
yeah, it took me a long time. I think sometimes I say it took me a long time, but I feel like I always knew. I think after that first summer in the lab, I mean, all my friends know. I used to talk about it all the time. Like, how can I not do research? How can I not do research? I love it so much. And at that point, I was so entrenched in this idea that I'm going to be a physician. I've like there have been a lot of experiences sort of over the course of my life. I've been like, oh, medicine. I'm really interested in it. I like the complex, like the science side and the people side, like the whole cliche. I like science and I want to help people. That's basically how it started for me. And so I went to a high school that was sort of focused on helping us understand our interest in science and medicine and health. It was like a small county vocational/technical school in Woodbridge. So that's where I sort of got more into this idea of, oh, I want to be a physician. I think once that summer where I explored research, I didn't know that you could be an MD PhD. That was like not in my vocabulary. And so I talked to a lot of my friends and they were like, oh, you should go into academic medicine. So academic medicine is just where you can hold a faculty position and you can teach and you can potentially do some research while you're also practicing as a physician. And that really held a lot of interest in me just because I also love to teach. I like love to mentor, love to teach, and I really wanted that to be a big part of my career moving forward. So I thought, oh, academic medicine, this seems perfect for me. And then that's sort of where I like started Googling and I got into the rabbit holes. And I was like, oh, even better than just academic medicine, there's a whole program where I can get an MD and get a PhD at the same time, and I can become like the face of academic medicine. Like that's what academic medicine is at its core, right? It's being able to do research and translate that to your patients. But I don't think I made the decision to commit to a PhD until like freshman year of college. I know that's super early for a lot of people, but it felt late for me because I'd already done so much research. So I was like, I should know, I should be sure. And I'm the type of person that like needs this like 10-year plan to feel confident about myself. So for that year where I was unsure, I was like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? And then I spent so much time in the lab where I was like, I can't not do a PhD at this point. Like I have to do research, and research is so important to my career. Where I sort of need this time to develop my research training and become an independent scientist, so that later on in my career I can sort of do my own research and get my own grants and funding and all that stuff.
Yeah, I absolutely love how you talk about research, your enthusiasm. I feel like I can relate so much. And I would love to ask you, you said you love your lab, you love the environment, and that's one of the things that led you to stay there. I was wondering if you could elaborate on maybe what exactly it is in your lab environment that makes you love it so much. And maybe then going along those lines, if you would like to talk about what are your favorite things about being in a lab, like what has research done to you that like maybe it helped you grow into a new person or something like that.
I'm glad that my love for research comes through. I feel like everyone tells me once I start talking about my lab, like I can't be stopped. So definitely there were a lot of things that sort of went into how my lab is amazing. I think part of the reason why it's really awesome is that our PI is like this very strong role model for women in STEM. She sort of built her whole career. She was I think she was the first faculty member who was a female in her department when she was hired. I think this was, I mean, I'm not gonna like belie her age, but it was a while ago. Yeah, and so she's really been killing it in this whole field. And so she's really developed this environment where she cares a lot about women in STEM. Our whole lab, I think we have at this point maybe 15 or 16 members in lab, and more that are sort of like sort of rotationary members. I think there's like 2 guys in our lab. The rest are girls. It's great. Sort of that great environment. I always feel supported. I think beyond that also, I mean, no one feels uncomfortable in the lab, which is always great. But I think we just sort of build an environment where we're like a little family. We hang out with each other. We like go out to eat. We go out to dinner, and it's just so simple to be with those people. You never feel like there's some sort of pressure that's on you to perform well. You never feel like if you make a mistake, you're going to be sort of held against it for some reason. Like it's going to be held against you. I mean, and it's just very easy to grow in that lab, just because I think also one of the main things that I got out of this lab and what made me stay is my sort of near peer mentor in the lab. When I first joined the lab, I was sort of attached to, or I was like given to this graduate student at the time. She was in her third year of graduate school, and she was an amazing mentor. She sort of like, I was also one of her first students, so we were sort of figuring it out together. And she was great with helping me learn and making sure that I knew what I was doing and answering like millions of questions that I had. And so I've worked with her since then. So she actually just defended her PhD. She is now fully doctor. She got an amazing job like after her PhD. So she's leaving in a month, which is incredibly sad. But so having her there sort of, I think, has really helped me grow as a scientist. And just everyone in the lab sort of embodies that same collegial feeling. It's like everyone loves each other. We all want to hang out with each other. We're all friends with each other. I think that really makes a difference. And that definitely started with the way my PI sort of builds this culture that is in her lab. That is, I think, different than a lot of other labs out there. I forgot what the second part of your question was. I'm sorry.
The second part of our question was, how has research changed you as a person?
Oh, it's definitely made me a lot more confident. I think I found something that I really love to do. And I think I got really lucky in that respect. I think very few people, or at least that early, a lot of people don't realize that this is something that they want to do for the rest of their life and that they like fully go into it. So I think it was helpful for me to be able to recognize that this is something that I want to do forever. And that really sort of made me more of myself, I guess. Like I even before this, I guess I didn't know, this is super cliche, but I guess I didn't know like what was missing. Like I definitely wanted to do more in my career, and I didn't realize what that was until sort of I found this research community and this like family in my lab. This definitely helped me become more confident and sort of become more able to express myself and sort of just an ability to think. I think being trained as a scientist just is a different way of thinking that you don't encounter anywhere else in your life. And so it's important to sort of develop those skills and figure out a way to translate those to different experiences in your life.
You have so much experience, both as like personal growth and growth as a scientist. What advice do you have for, let's say, incoming freshmen or just underclassmen in general who are looking to get into research and like trying to grow themselves as like their own career path or as a scientist?
Yeah, so 100%, the like first thing I would say is environment matters way more than you think, and matters a lot more than the subject matter. Again, like I didn't even know inflammation was a thing before I joined this lab, and now I want to get a PhD in inflammation because my lab was so supportive. So find a lab that is able to sort of click with you and that you feel comfortable in, and don't be afraid if that's not your first lab. People change labs all the time. I think you don't always get like good luck by getting a perfect lab the first time around. So don't feel like you have to stay with that lab the sort of like from freshman year on. And don't feel like you have to start in freshman year either. Like, give yourself some time to adapt to the environment, and then try to seek out those opportunities. Always be aware, especially at Rutgers. Rutgers is such a big school that no one is gonna spoon feed you anything. No one is gonna be there handing you opportunities. So it's really up to you to do whatever you want. And that's the beauty of Rutgers, is you can do whatever you want. Like, there's nothing holding you back. So reach out to professors, apply to programs, and then figure out what fits best, and then just spend time in lab. I think that really helps, and make it a priority. I think the more you make it a priority, the better it'll be for you, and the more you can get out of that experience.
I was going to ask a bit about your experience in the Aresti Rutgers undergraduate research journal. So what led you to become the editor-in-chief of it?
That is a very good question, and I love talking about RURJ, as we're called, and I can sort of hopefully everyone listening also sees the value in it and wants to become involved in it. So this was after freshman year. I did the Aresti Summer Science program, so I was super involved with Aresti already, and I really saw how Aresti could reach a lot of different undergrads that were doing research. And so when my friends and I we just like came up with the idea of, what if we started a research journal? Unknown to us, there was already a lot of work going on behind the scenes at Aresti to start that very thing. So our two founders, Fred and Prachi, they recently graduated like in May. So they are the ones who, in my freshman year, who sort of started developing this idea of a true, like, official undergraduate research journal at Rutgers. So there have been a lot of tries and failures to start something like this in the past. And so I think one of the things that we all recognize is that we have to partner with someone like Aresti, who can sort of help create this program that can be a little bit more long lasting and have a little bit more legitimacy. So I joined the team of the journal in sophomore year, when I helped pilot their first class of the peer reviewing program. So as a sophomore in my fall semester, it was like a small group of us. It was like 8 of us who took this class on how to peer review research. And this is another sort of part where my lab also played a big part in this. Is in my lab, every few weeks or so since I've joined, my PI and I, like, our whole lab sits together and we work on reviewing a manuscript that has been sent to my PI for peer review. So we go through the whole thing. We like, okay, these are the major and minor comments that we want to make about this paper, everything's wrong with the science, or how they can word things better to make it easier to come across, like how the normal peer review process sort of in the quote unquote real world works. And I really wanted to bring that to Rutgers too. So when I found out that this peer reviewing class existed at Rutgers, I was really excited about the prospect of joining the journal as someone who could sort of help them build that class a little bit more. So in my sophomore year of fall, I took this class. We learned a little bit about peer review. And at this point, also, they were looking for more people to join the team to develop this class and to develop this program and to sort of make the journal more of a thing, right? So I joined this group of founders. And so over the course of the sophomore year, especially the summer after sophomore year, we worked incredibly hard. So many hours were put in to basically create this program from ground up. We created this whole curriculum based off of like existing resources, where we take students who ideally have some research experience or have some experience reading papers, and we take them from the beginning to the end on how to review a manuscript, how to figure out whether the science is sound, or even humanities research. We really wanted to be interdisciplinary. So we taught them how we had to teach ourselves, because our entire group was a STEM group. So we taught ourselves how to review humanities research. We learned a lot, and then we basically tried to develop this curriculum to teach students to, okay, how can authors better structure their arguments, or how can they better structure their results, or how can they draw good conclusions based on the results that they present. And so in my junior year, I actually taught this class. There were 6 of us that were teaching this class. We had a cohort of, I think it was 36 students that were enrolled in our program. So in the fall, we taught them how to review manuscripts, and then in the spring, we actually had them review manuscripts that were submitted to the RURJ, the Rutgers Undergraduate Research Journal, for publication. So that was what was right this past spring, right? Past spring was them reviewing these manuscripts. And so as I sort of became involved in RURJ, I was really interested, I think, one, and then I really sort of connected with the mission of the journal and just this idea of wanting to bring the undergraduate research community at Rutgers closer together, because that was what really helped me freshman year. I was like, no one else around me was doing research. And I found a few people that were, and I was like, oh my God, you are my family. Like, these are the people that I want to hang around. So I think that really, I wanted to sort of be a part of that. So I sort of got more involved, and then I somehow ended up being the editor-in-chief. I think just over a course of, I was like, I wanted to do more stuff. So they're like, okay, here's all the stuff to do. And I was like, okay, let me do all this stuff. And so now we're actually, our applications are open for the next cohort of undergraduate reviewers, July 30th. I'm not sure when this episode will air, but July 30th is when they close. And then our first and second issues came out last year. So those are the issues that I actually peer-reviewed manuscripts for in my sophomore year. And then our next issue, which was peer-reviewed during the spring, will come out in September. And then hopefully it'll just, I mean, even after like all of us leave, hopefully there'll be enough people to stick around and keep the longevity of this journal going.
I'm all so thrilled to hear about all this wonderful enthusiasm, but also like entrepreneurship from such young people. And it's very inspiring. It's very motivating, and like to know that there's such driven people in the future of science is always so great. I mean, the whole purpose of this podcast is to get people excited and to know that there are other people out here doing work to get people excited about science and to make it accessible to other eventual people. That's just like makes me happy. As a fellow research lover, I am just absolutely glad that we got to talk to you today. I really, really love your passion. I think you're so determined and like you know everything around you. Like you're so settled and inspiring to listen to. And as I've been saying so far to all other driven people that we got the privilege to meet so far, the future of science strongly benefits from people like you. So thank you so much for being so cool, doing such cool stuff, and for being here with us today. It was really a privilege and so much like great stuff to hear from you. And thank you so much for being here.
Of course, thank you so much for having me. This is great. I love talking about research. I love talking with other people who also are in research. And so this is a great opportunity for everyone.
Thank you so much again. We wish you the best. I mean, it's probably coming to you. We don't need to wish it to you, but we're going to wish you it anyway. And remind you and all of our listeners that you've got potential.